Hello, BookTube. I thought I'd continue to try to get this channel back up and running, maybe with a mail haul, a little mail haul. Mail hauls are always fun. And we can start with a periodical, the TLS, the Times Literary Supplement, the greatest literary review in the English language, I think. This is a slightly older edition of the TLS. You wouldn't know it from what I have because the TLS is often late getting to me. Sometimes I'll get 3 issues at the same time, having gone 3 weeks without them. This one came from more than a week ago, and it was put in the mailbox on the morning of a day that ended up having a torrential rainstorm. A rainstorm that swept through really fast, so it didn't last all day. It barely lasted 2 hours. But when it happened in buckets. And because it was a fast-moving storm, you had a lot of wind. So the mail in the mailbox, if it was visible, if the lid wasn't down, was not protected from the elements. And as a result, this TLS got soaked. I don't know if you can make it out, but I have needed a week to dry this out. It was as sloppy and thin as tissue paper when I extracted it very carefully from the mailbox. I didn't want to just throw it away. The TLS always has a lot of stuff in it that I love reading, and the table of contents here looks really good. I'm sure that I will, but I had to wait for it to dry out. This issue has by J.E. Smith a review of a new movie called The Critic, starring Ian McKellen as a theater critic, and that review has the best headline in the thing: all smirk and no play. But the thing that caught my attention was a letter that I thought I'll read a bit of it to you. See, this is even difficult to fold because I've let it dry out in the dry air here. There was a review that Elizabeth Scott Bowman wrote of Rami Targoff's book, Shakespeare's Sisters. Relatively harmless, relatively silly book. I read it, barely talked about it at all on this channel. It overreaches, as all such books do. As I've mentioned many times before, if women are second-class citizens or household chattels, there is no alternate canon. It's not that the patriarchy has assigned us a canon like they assigned us a gender at birth. There is no alternate canon. If the other segments of society are not allowed to write, then they don't write. They certainly don't write King Lear. So Shakespeare's Sisters is a little bit dumb. So somebody from Columbus, Ohio, and needless to say, it isn't specified in this letter, but I am sure that it is from the university in Columbus, Ohio. I'm positive. Because this type of letter, that's the bastion of these things. They are only written from that point of view. This person lays into the review clearly deciding that every single element of it is wrong. The review talks about a loose network of women. The letter writer says they almost certainly didn't know each other. The review talks about the varying socioeconomic background. The letter says they were all rich. There were no poor people in the list. And when I was reading that kind of systematic knocking of the review, I was thinking, okay, well, I've received this kind of letter about reviews of my own, and I've also written these kind of letters. I know perfectly well that you are not an honest actor. You are just meaning to decimate something, probably for personal reasons. I read that review. It was the best that a featherweight book like Shakespeare's Sisters could expect to get. But when I was reading the review, as it was the letter, as it was working its way up in momentum, I realized what was coming. Because you can't leave any stone unturned when you're doing this sort of thing. And thanks to the mania that has gripped mainstream academia in the 21st century, the last stone will be predictable. I wanted to read you, I won't read you the whole letter, but I wanted to read you the end of it here. Some of these women were rich, but none wrote fiction in Woolf's sense. Virginia Woolf, in other words, the letter writer quotes from A Room of One's Own, that a woman must have money in a room of her own in order to write fiction. Though Carey's Mariam is a dramatic historical fiction, these women were not Shakespeare's sisters, nor sisters of each other, and at this point in the important process of recuperating early women writers and women's lives more generally, I wonder if it is still useful to consider them as women, first and foremost. I suspect, for instance, that Mary Sidney would have self-identified as a Sidney first, a Herbert second, and then as a member of the aristocracy and the Protestant faith. At least after her conversion, Carrie would almost inevitably have identified first as a Catholic. 4 of her daughters became nuns, and 1 son became a priest. Lanier was a second-generation immigrant, her family, all musicians from Venice, possibly originally Jewish. Clifford might indeed have identified first as a woman, since her brothers and sons all died young. Her father separated from her mother, and her own marriages seem to have been difficult. She lived among women to an unusual degree, but all these women are more interesting as individuals, not as representatives of their sex or any other category. The short form is that I am really hoping that this kind of lunacy dies out. I really am. Mary Sidney was a woman. It was the very first thing she knew about herself. It was the main thing she knew about herself for her whole life. I have no idea what self-identifying means, because the term itself is a lie. I am sure this person is an academic, and what these academics, what we can only refer to by an overused phrase, I admit at this point, but woke. When woke academics refer to self-identification, what they mean is public identification. They mean the exact opposite of what the word they've coined says. It's not inward. It's not an inward process. It's not self anything. It's public. It's all ridiculous. And I'm really hoping that it dies. And unfortunately, I think there are 2 things that could kill it. One is for academia and Hollywood and the mainstream media and large swaths of the public media to wake up to how ridiculous it is that we can even be talking about whether or not you self-identify as a woman. That's unlikely to happen. It's very, very meticulously done that's unlikely to happen. And the only other likely thing that can replace an intellectual fascism is an actual boots-on-the-ground fascism, which is even worse. So I may live to see this kind of nonsense as grounds for firing from the Ohio State University, or wherever this person comes from. It should be grounds for firing to write a letter in a public journal wondering whether or not it matters, whether or not we can be sure that Mary Sidney thought she was a woman. That should be grounds for firing you. Anyway, the only other thing I know about the letter is that if the reviewer in the original review, written by a woman, about a book by a woman, commissioned by an editor who is a woman, paid for by a different editor who is also a woman, overseen by an editor in charge who is also a woman, sent to major vendors, all the companies of which are run by women, and reviewed by women. If the reviewer had said, well, I think that identifying these figures in Renaissance history as women is a little bit self-defeating, they wouldn't have, not that they would have got a letter pointing out, well, aren't you horrible, aren't you a turf, or whatever the stupid word is. Instead, they would have got a letter from this same letter writer, because it's just a bloodthirst. It doesn't have any actual objective measure. But anyway, sorry, didn't mean to get off to a contentious start. Maybe it gets me involved. The PS to that letter can simply be very simple. Something so simple that me needing to say it in 2024 is actually a kind of epitaph for this century. So I will repeat that one takeaway from this letter. Mary Sidney was a woman, and she knew she was a woman. Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the mail. We've got 2 packages here. At least I think it's mail. I don't know how it self-identifies. We've got 2 packages here. What is this first one? So this comes out in April. A radically different world from today. Oh, right. Okay. Oh, I asked for this. Great. This is Fugitive Tilts by Ishion Hutchinson, the poet, the great poet, Ishion Hutchinson. In this collection of pieces written over the course of a decade, the author tests ways of thinking, plumbing the depths of memory of both the deep and recent past, to create an incomplete biography of love. Love of poetry discovered in childhood, love of home with its continual disconnections and returns, and love of the works and artists that look over him with an angel's aura, from Treasure Island to John Coltrane. He puts into words his journeys, the events, both biographical and literary, that limn his own life. Limn. Here are poetic meditations, travel logs and diaries, conversations with artists, and essays on writers. Fantastic. Oh, that is fantastic. Great. Uh, okay, well, he wrote House of Lords and Commons, which I think if there were a literary memory of the 21st century literature, House of Lords and Commons would be in that. It would be considered a great work of poetry for the 21st century. And here is his prose. Great, fantastic. Next year though, and now this next one, the last one that we'll do. So I'm afraid the last one. So the bulk of this video is just a rant. The last one is heavy, so it could be a finished copy, which would be great because that would mean that I have more books to consider for this year. What have we got here? Oh, it's a couple of things. Oh, okay. Well, the paper that was in it is the invoice. Fortunately, the invoice has these things zeroed out because I don't want to pay money for books that I'm going to write about. But this is a great double blast. Boy, oh boy. All right, so the letter was annoying, but the pieces of mail that I got today are great. And this is a double blast of Dante's Divine Comedy. The first one is, these are both from Princeton, is that right? Yes. Oh my, oh my. The first one is by Joseph Luzzi, and it is Dante's Divine Comedy, a biography. So it's a thin little thing, but this is another one of those things that we have seen before in new books. A book that writes about the life story of a book, whether it's Finnegan's Wake or Little Women or whatever it is. I love those kinds of books, especially if they're done really, really well. Let's see what this one is. I don't have a sheet for this, but this is from Princeton, so it's an academic press, so it could be out already and it could be expensive. And I don't know either detail because academic presses don't print prices on their books, and I don't have a pub sheet for the date. Let's see here. Written during his exile from Florence in the early 1300s, Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy describes the poet's travels through hell, purgatory, and paradise, exploring the state of the human soul after death. His sacred poem profoundly influenced Renaissance writers and artists such as Boccaccio and Botticelli, and was venerated by modern critics, including Auerbach and Harold Bloom. Dante's Divine Comedy narrates the remarkable reception of Dante's masterpiece, one of the most consequential religious books ever written. Tracing the many afterlives of Dante's epic poem, the author shows how it left its mark on the works of such legendary authors as John Milton, Mary Shelley, and James Joyce, while serving as a source of inspiration for writers like Primo Levi, Gramsci, as they faced their most extreme forms of political oppression. He charts how the dialogue between religious and secular ideas in the Divine Comedy has shaped issues ranging from changing conceptions of women's identity to debates about censorship to the role of canonical literature in popular culture. Okay, well, that started to go get a little dark. If this is an academic treatise, then it will be unreadable. All academic treatises are unreadable, intentionally so. It'll be full of all the blights and blemishes of academic fiction. Ridiculous, antiquated, totally unused words like limb. Academic doubling. The doubling that academic writing does without even thinking. So in that sentence, if it were academic, it would be that does without even thinking and thoughtlessly. They do academic prose does doubling like crazy, and if that's what I'll be sorry to see it, but if that's what this is, then it won't get me quite as excited as I was when I was offered it. But this next one, they make a great pair. This next one is actually lovely. This is a translation by Charles Singleton of the Divine Comedy, also from Princeton, in a lovely naked hardcover. Just oh my, oh you're kidding me. Oh, how interesting. It's a prose translation. Oh, I don't know. When's the last time I read a prose translation? It's got illustrations. There we go. It's got illustrations, the kind of stained glass blocky feature that is on the cover there. And it's prose. Oh my, with little illustrations of some of the punishments, head buried upside down with their heads in the ground. Anybody recall without checking what that is? I don't know. I know that I'm supposed to be all boundary enforcing about all of this, but I don't think I have the violent negative reaction to a prose divine comedy that a lot of you probably do. What is your reaction to that? I mean, in all cases here, whether it's Penguin Classics doing a prose translation of the Aeneid or a prose translation of, God forbid, Ovid's Metamorphoses, uh, the more you know about the original, the more you realize, oh no, 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 the verse sings. Remember those videos that Tom L.A. Brooks did of the Divine Comedy, canto by canto? The prose sings, or the verse sings, and every word of it is agonized over. Reducing it to prose, well, it gives you a nice handy volume, but I wonder what it does. And obviously, the translator, Charles Singleton, will know that better than anybody. He knows what he's doing here. So what do we think about that? Is a prose Divine Comedy worth reading? I'm asking rhetorically. I, of course, am going to read it, but well, actually, let's read the back here and see. Charles Singleton's English language translation of the Divine Comedy is widely considered to be one of the first renderings of Dante's great masterpiece. Is this the Charles Singleton? That can't be. Why on earth would they do that? What? No. I know there's a scholar named Charles Singleton who was from my time. And there's no way that Princeton would. There's no way that Princeton would reprint it when we're in the age of translations. Okay, well, let's continue here. Singleton's prose is both faithful and scholarly, and sensitive to the subtle nuances of meaning and richness in reference to Dante's epic poem. Here, for the first time, is the single-volume edition of Singleton's celebrated translation. Oh, okay. So maybe it is the guy I'm thinking of. The guy I'm thinking of did this a long time ago, when the world made sense. This beautifully illustrated book brings together all 3 volumes of Dante's poem, describing his travels down to the circles of hell, up over the mountain of purgatory, and his ultimate ascension through the celestial spheres to paradise. Dante's divine tour provides a timeless allegory for the journey of one's soul toward union with God. Featuring an incisive introduction by Simone Marchesi, a glossary, and stunning illustrations by acclaimed artist Roberto Abbiati, this handsome edition of the Divine Comedy introduces a new generation of readers to what is perhaps the preeminent achievement of Italian literature. Charles Singleton, 1909 to 1985. Son of a gun. Somebody at Princeton, this has to be a passion project. This has to be. You can tell them a mile away. Somebody at Princeton remembered the Singleton Dante and thought, we should reprint that. We should give it another lease on life. Incredible. So you're going to mention Hopkins, yes? Was a professor of humanistic studies at Johns Hopkins University and a world-renowned scholar of medieval literature. And here he is. Okay, the Singleton Divine Comedy. I'm terrible with names. I didn't put it together immediately. I'm sorry about that. So we have a Dante double blast here. A study of the work and its reception over time, and the work itself in an older, neglected, certainly hard to find translation. So a double blast of Dante. Don't know when these are probably this year. Probably they're coming out this year, November maybe. And Fugitive Tilts by Ishion Hutchinson, the poet. His prose work, probably his first prose work. Yeah, this is his first collection of prose pieces. Many of which some of which I may have read. These books like these, no matter how highfalutin they are in their descriptions, are always just more or less collected deadline prose of the type that I write. Not much better than the type that I write, but still of the type that I write. So maybe I've read some of these before in the New York Review of Books. I wonder if the early edition will tell me. Or this is a galley copy, so it may not have acknowledgments or attributions yet. No, it's just wide open blank pages. Okay, well, they'll be there, and I wonder how many of them will be thanking the folks at the London Review or New York Review of Books or something like that. But all in all, very good mail haul. Double Blast of Dante is always good by me, and because they're finished copies, whether I know the print date or not, they're both going on the pile for tonight, which is great. I'll spend half the evening with Dante, which would be great. So anyway, there's the mail. Sorry if these videos are still a little on the awkward side. I'm going to try